Hello, welcome to the Squarebase Show with me, your host, Rob, and your other host, Val Heffelfinger. And today, count them, we've got 5 things that we will change about the old world. Let us know what you would change in the comments below.
Yeah, don't even wait. Don't even wait to hear what we would change. Just get in there.
I have a sneaking suspicion that YouTube commenters have never listened to a YouTube video ever.
Not our commenters, Rob.
I'm calling you out. I'm calling you out, guys, girls, MBs. I reckon none of you have watched till the end of the video. I'm going to drop an amazing secret bomb, at some point during the last 25 minutes of the video.
Don't tell them when.
Well, that's 25 minutes. Could be 25-minute point or 1 minute till the end.
Right. Fair point.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. So everyone, we're going to find out how Val's been doing. We're going to find out how I've been doing. And then we're going to be talking about the 5 things that we'd like to change in the old world. This is actually quite fun because 6-7 months into the launch of the old world, we actually did a show, if you cycle back to the beginning of the edition, where we talked about the 5 things that we love about the old world and its launch. So this is nice. This is like a continuation of that. And this is, with the experiences of playing in events, running events, and all of those other things. The 5 things that we'd like to see changed up, the 5 things we'd like to see a little bit different. And I'm sure you've all got some thoughts about what you'd like to see as well. The intricacies and nuances of certain units definitely are things that we'd all like to see changed up. So it's going to be really fun. I'm very much looking forward to this because there are a couple of things I'd like to get off my chest about the game system, which I think are worth talking about. And I know Val has been furiously excited about thinking about this in the future and then talking about it today. So that's great. And I'm looking forward to that. So, but before we do that, Val, how's things? How's Squarebase Toronto looking? What's going on?
The SBO T.O, Squarebase Open Toronto, is coming along. It's coming along really nicely. And I am shocked to tell you, Rob, that I was just checking our ticket supply. And since we expanded to 60 spaces from our original 40, we still have approximately 4 tickets available.
Oh.
So there are 4 tickets available right now if you want to come to the Squarebase Open Toronto, October 19th and 20th, actually in Toronto, or as locals call it, Toronto. You're going to want to swing on over to bestcoastpairings.com and get a chow. Hit that link.
You can't keep stealing his thing.
I said Kappa Chow. It's its own thing.
He's a famous guy. Yeah.
I talk to him all the time because I genuinely like him. It's an homage.
I don't understand how you can have a conversation with someone who's never had an opinion. How's it done?
Uncle Adam? Speaking of Midwest, pre-show conversation, probably unrelated to this. Uncle Adam is salt of the earth, sir. He could be running for vice president of the United States. It was Tim Walz or Uncle Adam. He just missed it by a hair.
Okay, listen, I thought we were training the lib out of you, but fine. You carry on with what you're up to, okay?
Anyway. I also, pardon me, I've made some great progress.
Fast!
Very fast. Super fast. Mega fast. Okay. I've made some great strides in terrain acquiring acquisitions.
Nice.
I want to shout out immediately X-Planet Games, my homeboy Lionel from Mississauga, rolled over to his store yesterday to pick up some prize support, and then I was like, "Hey, brother, you got any of them trees?" And he's like, "Oh, you mean this gigantic box of OG Citadel Woods?"
Whoa!
So I picked up, I don't know, I feel like what was it? It was about 12 stands of Citadel Woods, and then he was like, he tried to not give me the trees because he knows what's up. He's like, don't bother with the actual trees, man. They're the most annoying, stupid things. Don't do it. And I was like, this is a premium event, sir. Not only will our Citadel Woods be on the bases when you get to the table, and then you can remove them and leave them on the side for the entire game, but I will re-glue all of the leaves back on these trees. That is how premium this event is, Rob. So you can actually break them off immediately. As you remove them, as you pick them up to remove them and put them on the side, all the leaves will, of course, break off of them. But they'll look good.
They will look great.
When you get in there, you'll be looking good. Also supplied me some mats. He was really, really helpful and took a lot of weight off. I'm also, I don't know if I mentioned last week, but there's going to be a collab to create the 20 hills that are needed for the extra tables that we've added, with none other than Mr. Hobby Workshop himself, Eric from Eric's Hobby Workshop. I'm going to be going there on Friday, and we're going to be flocking the hell out of some hills. And then he's going to make the
Wait,
hill.
you're going to be going there on the Friday before?
No, like this Friday.
Oh, you go to Eric's place.
Yes.
Oh, nice. That's cute.
Yes, I'm going to the actual Hobby Workshop, Rob. And then so that's exciting. And then finally, everyone who has signed up and bought tickets and is like, is this a scam? There's no pack available for this event. Rob and I had met earlier this week and finalized our vision for it. And so yeah, that pack will be coming out. Today is Wednesday. I would say you should get an email with it today on Wednesday. It's gonna be sick.
Very fun. Very fun. I'm surprised Lionel has time to find trees with all of the fucking he does because he's so awesome. Yeah.
Oh goddamn!
Goddamn!
Genuinely handsome man, and he's going to be appearing, I think, at the event to say hello. So he told me to quote, "Tell me the dates." So I don't know. Maybe he shows up.
All right. Okay. Well, it sounds like you got everything in hand. That's exciting. I booked my flights. So we're ready we're ready to rock. Book my flights with over a month to spare, which in Robbo World, that's huge.
Pretty good pricing too, I say.
Yeah, it's
not bad.
Yeah, pretty cheap to get over. Like truthfully, it was like what, like the problem is it was like $450 English to fly over and back.
Yeah.
No, it was a little
bit more. Are you British Airways or Air Canada?
It was like $550. I think we're Air Canada. I think it was $550 actually because I had to pay for a bag, a suitcase sort of thing. But the big problem is that like it's like easy another like 200 quid to travel from Nottingham to London Heathrow.
Oh man, it's
like,
pricey.
It's so expensive. I'm just gonna get the coach. I'm gonna get a 30 quid coach and just be uncomfortable for 6 hours. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. That's the start of my journey.
Okay, yeah, fair. Well, kicking the junk. Why not? And then that's assuming they're not on strike, which happened the last time you tried to come.
But thank you to everyone on the Squarebase Patreon who's been able to support us in doing that. So you're all the best. So thank you. Thank you for allowing this to happen.
Meeting of the minds.
Yeah, and then me and Val talked about it. I want to be really upfront with everyone, like super, a lot of clarity on what we're doing. Transparency, that's the word I'm looking for. Obviously, could come over and play. Could come over and play for 5 games. Feel like I could be better served maybe making some videos of the event. I'd love to know what you think, again, as the audience. Me just played 5 games. I can play 5 games anywhere. Should I play 5 games against 5 lucky Canadians? We'll see. Or maybe Americans. Or should
Canadians, Americans, maybe another British person. People from all over the place, man.
Yeah, or should I be making videos and like really shouting at the community? I feel like it's number 2. I feel like it's a video is the right way to, then all of you can kind of feel like you're involved as well. Maybe you could get a stream from the event. Maybe you could get some videos from the event. Who knows? But I think that's I think that's the right call.
I think, I think I'll probably be the spare. So if we do have a late drop or something like that, I will hop in, and maybe that's what we should do. Maybe we can alternate in. If we wind up with an odd number, we can alternate in. Otherwise, just walk around, high-fiving people, making cool videos, and making sure everyone has water and feels comfortable.
I mean, it's very exciting. I will be, I love that. Okay,
I was also scouting, just so you know, I was scouting places to eat nearby the venue, and I realized that it is a mere block away from the Real Jerk, which is the famous location of the Rihanna featuring, I don't know, some guy named Drake. He used to be cool. Music video from many years ago. Not cool. No,
not cool.
He was cool though for a minute. It was a minute. Like there was a minute there. Toronto had a cool rapper.
Yeah, but like now you've got your own Diddy, which is fun.
Oh God, he's totally gonna be the next one, isn't he?
Yeah, he's currently the next one.
Currently, it takes years for them to get around to that, though.
We'll see.
He's got to ruin way more lives.
I don't know. Certified lover boy. We'll see. Right. Anyway, so let's talk about the 5 things that we changed in the old world. How does that sound? All right.
Well, hold on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm fresh off the back of 2 weekends of obviously playing GTs. which has been fun. And for Square-based people who don't tune into any of my other content, I have also been moving house, which is just one of the worst things to do, but really fun. Got a little home studio office set up now. It's not everything. I haven't got a mic and camera and stuff yet, which I'm going to do at some point next month. But then I'll be able to, like, you know, maybe do a late night stream, maybe do some hobbying on stream, do some stuff like that as well. Maybe record some bits.
I'm so happy for you that you've got like a home workspace. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I mean, I like the office space I'm in is nice as well. But so yeah, been moving house and it's just a lot of boxes. It's like it was like 4 flights down, 3 flights up. So that's taken up a lot of my time mentally. In my downtime, because we did have an AOS event this weekend, I have built and undercoated my first Bretonian board, which I'm going to be running.
Sick.
Which I'm going to be running. Which I'm going to be setting up for our Old World events. I'm going to do a themed board now for every one of our tables, and I'm halfway through prepping the Empire board, which includes a fantastic Wizard's Tower, which
nice.
So I've been enjoying that. So very much looking forward to that. Really looking forward to having some themed Old World boards, the first boards we did. So yeah, like that hobby takes a while. Although, like, shout out to Richie for teaching me how to slap chop again. He's like, you should just do this thing where you like spray it black and dry brush it grey, and then use contrast. And I was like, you mother. That is a good point.
That is a good point.
That's a good point. No, he also gave me like some color suggestions. The thing that I really struggle with painting is the color choices. That's where I really fall down. I'm always like, cool, I know that's wood. Wood's fine. Wood, metal and wood, I'm fine. That's stone, that's fine. But then you're like, the roof. What color? And I ended up doing like a weird turquoisey color. And it works.
That often happens.
And it works perfectly. But I'm like, I literally had to look like 7 different, like, you know, pictures on Google of like different, like, you know, empire houses and what they looked. And then someone online did like a red one, and I was like furious. I was like, the red one looks great too. I should have done a red one. So I was really upset.
Absolutely. That's the another thing I acquired for the event is a bunch of Tabletop World buildings that I found in a whale of a deal. And they were painted by local Canadian terrain manufacturer and painter, Greenleaf Terrain. And you may, if you've ever seen the Tabletop Scenics on Mini Wargaming, and also at the original Square-based Open, we had a bunch of their stuff was painted by Greenleaf.
It's my favorite stuff. It's my favorite stuff.
He used a turquoisey blue. What's the word of the turquoisey stuff on copper, like when you have it turns green. Verdigris, yes. I wonder if that's the effect that is being gone for there. I don't know. That's a lot of copper roofs.
Yeah, I think it's gonna look really good when I get around to it. So I'm excited about that. But obviously, I'm away at the beginning of October. I'm away at the SBO. So we'll try and get it done. But I'm really looking forward to it. And then also just planning next year and the events that we're going to run at the arena, and still like, you know, toying with the idea of doing a really big event, toying with the idea of.
But you hate them, Rob.
I do hate large events. I really do. I really, really do. But my problem is, hear me now. If I don't do a large event, someone else will do a large event. And when they do a large event, they'll do a shit event.
Potentially.
And then it'll just end up being basement store 40K. And I think the Old World shouldn't be basement store 40K. Which is like, by the way, I mean basement store 40K, I mean all 40K events. So I just don't want to see that happen. But that'll be the future. That'll be the future. I don't really right now. Can't think about it right now. I'm too excited to talk about the changes that we should be looking at in the Old World.
Are we ready to move on to the main topic?
Yeah, I think so. All right, well, I think I'm
ready. You're an impeccable host. You know how to time these transitions. I trust your lead, as always, implicitly. And Rob, I want to say that I want to hear you go first. I want to know. Now, are we ranking these in any particular priority order? Are we getting sexier?
I think some of the bits that I have kind of work in an order. But I'm gonna hit them up. Maybe the bits that I wanted to talk about will also come up. But I'm gonna start with what I think is the biggest problem in the Old World right now. I'm gonna talk about infantry.
Okay,
That's where I'm at.
My number one as well.
Oh, Okay, well then maybe we're simpatico, as they say. So basically, let's talk about the problem before we go any further. And I'm sure other people, if you've got thoughts on these, do leave them in the comments. So infantry has like a two-pronged problem, realistically. Number one, it almost can't pick its fights because it's slower to engage than other armies. And if you haven't played Old World, what happens is you take your movement and then you add on some dice to create your charge range, effectively. There's charge range and also your, like, how far you will charge. And almost always cavalry, and most importantly dragons, but cavalry and dragons and, you know, a bunch of other stuff is just faster than your basic infantry, much faster. In some cases, it's like twice as fast, right?
Yep.
And so its threat range, or its, like, you know, ability to project power is very small. So it's always getting charged. Let's couple that with the other problem in that when you do damage, when you charge and if you strike at initiative before the other unit, then if you wipe out their front rank, they're not going to be able to fight. Okay? So in that situation, the opposing unit, because you gain initiative on the charge, is going to wipe out the front rank of an enemy unit. Not always, but it's going to wipe out the front rank of an enemy unit, and then that unit is not going to be able to strike back. Now, because of the very, very fun, and I really do like it, for buy-go rules, it does mean that unit isn't necessarily just immediately fleeing off the board. So it's not it's not a massive disaster.
Caught or run down, yeah.
Or run down, okay? But it does mean that most likely that unit is almost never getting to swing. And watching, you know, units like Warriors of Chaos, you know, etc., like elite units that never ever swing a blade, I'm like, why have I ever built and painted them? And also, you know, that's the reason I think you see less and less of them on the board. You don't get the charge, you don't get the charge, and you basically are never engaging with a unit, and that feels truly rubbish for a ton of reasons. It really does. And then obviously the threat range thing is maybe something we could put a pin in and come back to, because I think that kind of is also worth talking about. But my solution to this, and let's definitely talk this through if you want, my solution to this would be to either have fighting 2 ranks, maybe 3 for spears, or just have step up return. That's what I would have, right? So those are the 2 things. So how do you feel about the problem now?
Okay. So, first of all, yeah, this is literally the first thing I wrote down on my sheet. So we're of the same mind. We're both OG 8th edition stands, although you have a love-hate relationship with it. And I know that's going to be very upsetting to a lot of the YouTube commenters. Please, give me a dissertation on all the reasons why you think 8th edition is so terrible. But I just want to say this, that I think a lot of the problem with the way 8th edition combat mechanics work, and I'll explain them in a hot second, was the fact that you had these intractable bricks of infantry. So you got bonuses for having wide ranks, so up to 10 wide. You got to fight in three rank depth, and you had step up, so you had lots of dice. But you also had the other rule that caused a lot of problems, which of course is out of my head. But essentially, they were unbreakable if they would never fall back from the combat if they were
Steadfast.
Outnumbering their opponent. Steadfast, thank you. If they were outnumbering their opponent. Actually, sorry, it was an unmodified leadership role if they were outnumbering their opponent. So it made these bricks of infantry very hard to break on the charge if you were cavalry, and it turned the game into these very large sort of Death Star-y bricks. And this was, a bit non-interactive and not fun for some people. Also resulted in there needed to be a really big fish in that game mechanically, known as magic. And you had all these big overpowered spells that, were, I think, kind of designed to deal with these big bricks. So that's a bit of a preamble. If we look at where Old World is right now, we have mechanics on the steadfast side of things, which is the idea that infantry is actually a lot harder to break. And we called this when we were actually first looking at the mechanics, right? Mm-hmm. We saw that infantry was actually a lot harder to break on the charge because of fallback in good order, as long as you outnumber, or as long as you're not doubled out 2-1. We saw that, it was, that part was there, but you're right. The damage output of them is super low. And I don't see why you couldn't have something like, step up or fight in 2 ranks. So the default before was you had supporting attacks instead of coming from the width of your unit, like guys not in base to base. Supporting attack came from anyone that was behind someone in the front rank. And that encouraged, what they called party buses at the time. So like deep, long units, but it encouraged big units because that meant that you were getting to hit back with two ranks. Most infantry in the game only has one attack in the front rank anyway. And so having those supporting attacks in the back gave them more damage output. And step up allowed it so that, you always got to hit with as many attacks as you had left in your front two ranks. So I think at a minimum, having that back where, a unit that's charged in the front is able to swing back fully, I think is important to give them some damage output. I don't think is going to be overwhelming, but it's going to help a lot of those. It's going to help a lot of those units, like, I don't know, just right off the top of my head, Saurus Warriors, like low initiative, good combat units that are essentially useless right now because they can literally never get any attacks off because they don't have a good armor save and they're just all dead before they can swing. This is a controversial mechanic though, and I think there's opportunity to make it so that, like, we have, for example, first charge, which is awesome on a lot of cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first charge could remove step up, for example, so that some elite units of cavalry, heavy cavalry, is able to go in there, hit them without being hit, and potentially break a unit. You could have no step up if you're hitting in the flank. Like, there's lots of ways to make it so that it's not OP, right?
Yeah, I don't see it I don't see how it's OP at all. Like, I really don't. Like, ultimately, you get to do the damage first. If you do want to have unit, like, some models, like, let's take elite infantry, for example, fairly expensive. If I go into them with a large model or a faster model and I do enough that I wipe out the front rank, I might be hitting into the second or third rank. Who knows? I might be doing a lot of damage into the unit, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, they might be able to step up and then also swing. But at that point, not the damage is done, but a bunch of damage is done, right? Mm-hmm. And the trade back in that situation is, you might not even get a trade back. But ultimately, the faster units and also the more deadly units are almost always going first. They're almost always engaging in the fight. So you're almost always be like, well, I've stepped back and I've done damage to you. It's like, fine, but you chose that engagement because you get to choose the engagements almost all the time. So that's something that I think people should focus on. I also think the fact that you have a game where where you've got whole bricks of warriors, I'm not just talking about Chaos Warriors, I'm talking about all warriors. Warriors aren't swinging in the game. It's genuinely not thematic. It doesn't make sense. Like, again, like, especially, like, I like what you said about first charge. I do like the idea that you're giving impact to what cavalry can do. But cavalry's already well, I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But cavalry's already great because it can choose its fights over infantry. So you've already got a natural advantage. And the big brick thing, people can already make big bricks if they want to. And they do. Mm-hmm. Like, they absolutely can. And that is super okay. Like, I don't think that that's a problem. And these things are you're not stepping up and doing 7 attacks. You're stepping up and you're doing an attack. Like, if you're 6 wide, you're stepping up, you're doing 6 attacks. You're like, oh, no, don't break the game. I would not have step up be on monstrous units. So, like, or heavy units. So, like, I wouldn't have it be on, like, ogres. I wouldn't have it on a bunch of other units because the bodies are in the way or whatever you wanted to write as a story that they.
It could be like that's a great insight. It could be a close order. It could be a close order rule, for example, where just like where it favors things that are heavy infantry, guys who are designed for like fighting, and that might give some also another nice little bit of differentiation between units. And like we're just talking about step up, whereas like. The idea that supporting attacks, like one of my least favorite mechanics is that supporting attacks are basically it's the fighting rank. I think the fighting rank is actually a really bad mechanic because it encourages width as opposed to like ranked up units marching in depth. And so I think like at a minimum step up is required. And then after that, you could look at having supporting attacks coming from the rank immediately behind the front rank, and then just get rid of the idea of supporting attacks for like people in non-base to base. I think that going back to something like that, I think would be very interesting. It would be very, very interesting. But it's almost like a taboo because of how much the concept of step up is tied to hatred for 8th edition, I think.
Yeah. Let me also talk about my goals. It's important.
Yes.
This isn't really even a conversation about balance. I do have like a couple of balance points I'd like to talk about in the future. What this is do I feel like infantry really see play? Not as much as they should. And do I really feel like, with the exception of stuff that is for some reason silly, yeah, but like because it has some special rules that do something. But I would like to see, bricks of warriors, like a rank and flank game that isn't a rank and flank game. Like, the bricks of warriors that make Old World seem so thematic. I talked about this loads. Like, you walk past an Age of Sigmar game, it looks this cornucopia of stuff in circles and squares. But then you look over to an Old World game and you're like, I understand that. Like, as a new person, you completely understand. I understand that is a battle. They are elves and they are humans. And I understand and I can see it. But at the moment, it doesn't very much look like, walls of men and elves battling against each other, which is so exactly the opposite of how the art looks. So I'm really pushing for this to because more than anything, and probably one of Games Workshop's only attempts at doing so anymore, is a game that's trying to be a simulated war game. Yes, with dragons and elves and warriors, but it's a war game. And I feel like it should look a little bit more like that. Like that's where my impetus comes from. So if people are like, it'll do this or do that, I'm like, just give it a shot. It's not going to break anything right now. If for the next 6 months all the infantry were to do step up, we'll find out what it's like, and then in 6 months' time we'll have a conversation and see what that looks like then. That's it. So I don't want.
What are your thoughts on supporting attacks and like fighting an extra? Would you just say step up plus like the way that it works right now? So like. Because if we just added step up, and we still had the fighting rank mechanic, then if you had a unit of 20 that was too deep, you're always going to get 10 attacks in or whatever. Would you say it's important to have the supporting attacks come from the extra ranks behind? No, or would you just like to see step up?
I would just like to see step up. That's what I'd like to see. And then I do have a follow up to this. I probably could just I do have a follow up to this because I think someone's going to be like, Rob, and then I know what the next thing's going to be. But I'll leave that for now. I'll come back to that point later. And I think that's where I'm at. And that was your first point as well. Would you add anything?
I think I got to say a lot there about it. Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind. I think, and again, great thing for the comments. I think right now, if we look at how infantry function as like combat units, their output does not generally come from their actual combat output. It comes from how you trick them out to maximize static combat res, which is so gamey,
but boring.
And it's gamey and boring, right? Like it's not like I'm gonna go in there and smash these guys. I'm gonna go in there and I know that I can challenge out the most dangerous character or monster, character riding a monster. I know they're gonna do a maximum of 6 or 7 combat res to me. I have a static res of 6 or 7. Like I'm at least drawing that or maybe even winning that combat. And then I outnumber them. Maybe I can chase them down. That's kind of how you approach infantry in combat right now in a lot of cases, is by maximizing static res. And that's kind of bullshit. It's boring. And I think that there are ways to make, because the counter to this, I think, is what's the point of getting the charge if they're going to be able to swing at me anyway? And I think the way you solve that is by making it so that the front arc of infantry is what's dangerous. So if you're charging into the front, that's where they get their step-up attacks. That's where they get, I think supporting attacks even, to be honest with you, should come from the rank behind, not from the fighting rank. Because that's also going to encourage ranks, because that's the other problem we have right now, is that there's nothing in the game that really encourages depth. We're mostly encouraged to be wide. And And so yeah, so I think if you make it so that these are rules that trigger in the front arc, so it's like, oh shit, it's dangerous to charge a wall of spears, but it could be cool if then you reward people for charging into the flanks more, into the rear more, by removing some of those abilities to like step up and get extra attacks. Make it so that that's really devastating when you allow your infantry to be outflanked, and let them be powerful in combat when you're doing with that. And don't give these rules to, like you said, monstrous cavalry, probably even just regular cavalry. Things with Swiftstride shouldn't be able to do this. This should be like an infantry-centric mechanic, not like a global mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the goal here is to drive infantry to play and feel like infantry. You know, and their cavalry does slam into a unit of infantry, but like they would in real terms. Eventually, some guys would get to do a stab, like they would, like, you know, and then when they do get bogged down, then they get to do more stabbing. That is how it should work, and that is how it works. And ultimately, they don't get to you again, with the faster units, you get the choice to engage in those fights.
Right.
You get that choice. It's like, it's not a surprise to you. So you're the one dictating those combats. So if you're like, if I go in there, I'll lose, don't go in there. It's very simple, you know, as a point. So that was my first point, but it seems like it was both of our first points. So that's...
Yeah. Now you said you had, like, just for the flow of the conversation, you said there was a follow-on to that one. Do you want to just quickly go to that?
I would have a max width on units.
Yeah. Easy.
Like that, I think that's the next thing that people are going to say. It's like, well, especially if, you know, like you say, if you can fight, and then you can fight from supporting rank, and it's all like, you're like, I'm going to be 30 wide and have 900 attacks. It's dumb. It looks dumb. Like, I think you can talk about skirmishers. Skirmishers can be as wide as they like, or whatever fucking shape they want to be, because skirmishers are just ridiculous. But I think having a width that is, I don't know what the number is. I just said 10 out of due diligence for round numbers. But, you know, like, I think, you know, 12, 14, if you want to do something really fun, you know, if someone can have a conversation, whatever it might be. But I think there's a certain point where you're like, I can't be bothered with looking at a line of dudes. You know, and I know that, like, this kind of ties into a conversation with, well, Rob, if that's the case, can I shoot in 2 ranks as well? It's a great point. Like, you know, I really do understand that, but I do think that there's a conversation to have with the width, and I think the width should be minima, or have a maximum, like a maximum width for a unit. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there was, so previously, again, I speak largely from an 8th edition perspective. So like that still to this day, it's something that I kind of view this game through. And 8th edition encouraged width by giving the horde formation rules, which essentially allowed you, because there was step up, and then also you had supporting attacks from the rank behind you. If you were in horde formation, you got to do extra attacks from the 2 ranks behind you. So that was a lot. That was a bucket of attacks, and that was a width of 10. And so that was, as a result, as wide as you got, right? You got as wide as 10.
Yeah.
I see there's no reason why, you know, because it's an unwieldy formation, so people would figure out, okay, so if I go 10 wide with this unit, I can still maneuver kind of. I'm going to do it for the benefit of those attacks. I think if you just cap the amount of supporting attacks that you can have in the front rank at a number, maybe it's 10, maybe, you know, whatever it might be, then, you know, that's a way to basically encourage a maximum width. You don't have to say that the maximum unit is 10 wide, but you can say that the maximum amount of, you know, like, extra attacks you can get from the fighting rank who are not in base-to-base contact is maybe 6 or something like that. I don't know. But like, you can pick a number within these rules, and you can basically disincentivize people from going wider than a certain number by not being able to take advantage of anything more than that.
Someone has come up with a great suggestion in the chat. Shout out to Ortvald. I love that. What if you can make 2 supporting attacks from the front rank for every rank that you have? So, like, you know, if you are 10 wide and there are 4 or maybe even 6 models that aren't in base-to-base contact, so you would be able to make those 6 attacks, but you can only make those attacks because you're also got 2 ranks. if that makes sense. So, like, your supporting attacks from the side are based from your ranks at the back, up to, obviously, again, a cap. So you can't go.
Oh, that's fascinating. So like, yeah, so your width has to be supported. So like, you can't be a single line wide and get those attacks. So that's cool.
That's really elegant.
That is very elegant, and that also, that again, anything to encourage some depth, I think, is good. I mean, you don't need the like hilarious party buses that we used to have. And by the way, the rules distinctly make that impossible because you can't be longer than you are wide. Mm-hmm. So like the party bus formation, so like really deep, 5x10 type formations that you saw in the past just are impossible in this game. They're not allowed. You always have to be equal, depth to your files. So I think that's a really good elegance. So that is really elegant. That if you want to have extra attacks from the fighting rank, they got to come from being supported. So there needs to be someone behind them. And that also, I think, is another reason why step up could work. Step up could only work. It could be a good rule to have because that's going to encourage you to always have those. As long as you have ranks, that means that you're going to have attacks in that fighting rank, and that could be a good way to balance keeping the fighting rank mechanic, which again I'm not a big fan of, but limiting width and encouraging some depth.
I think a good point to, because I didn't do this, so I apologize. Just for everyone basically at home who doesn't know, when you have a line of infantry, for all the enemy models that are in base contact with you, you can make one supporting attack for every model in that line of infantry along that first rank, the first fighting rank. There. So, if you're 20 wide and they're engaged with 5, that's an additional 15 attacks you could hit with. And in addition, the reason you do that is because we don't have step up, no one can fucking fight with their infantry units. Like, no one can. Like, when you're just a normal sized looking unit, you cannot fight with your unit. Therefore, you aren't doing damage with your unit. So it's literally just a wound counter that eventually dies, or maybe it does static combat res, one of the two. So, like, the other reason I think that you see line hammer and you see all those units strung out is because literally people want to fight with the models they want to fight with. They want to play dwarfs. They want to be like, I want to hit you with a great weapon, but I can't.
Yes.
And so there's only one option to do it. So I think also another problem is wheeling those units, moving those units. They get you ask a billion questions, so many incidental connections, so many things. They're very unwieldy. And honestly, I don't think the games designers would be overly happy with making it look that way. So I think the game designers would be much happier to not see lines of dudes and see little units of dudes. So I think that. I think that's positive.
Yeah, so like right now, the state of infantry, if you're game focused, and I think this will happen to you naturally, even if you're just playing games, is that you build your big unit of Chaos Warriors that you remember having back in the day, and you get it on the table, and you start to realize that this isn't actually doing what I hoped it would do. And then you start whittling away at it. Suddenly that unit is maybe a minimum size. Maybe it's 2 ranks. It gets smaller and smaller as you iterate your list. Probably even just going to game night. You're going to start moving away from these things because it's not going to be fun. They're not going to be interactive. They're going to get beat up and they're going to run away. And there's 2 places you can go with that. Minimum units that have a big weight of attack. So if they do manage to get a charge off, or if a few of them survive, they still get to swing, or things that are built again just to get as much static combat res using items and ranks and bonuses. That's the sort of the state of ranked up infantry. And I think with these tweaks, who knows if it's even enough, but at least it might make it a little more interesting for them. And I think that would be really cool for them to look at. And these are obviously we saw a great idea just now in chat. If the games designers took this away and is like, okay, this is not creating the game state we're looking for. We want combined arms armies that look like the pictures. I'm sure JTY is a creative man. I know he is, in fact, because he helped write he wrote this thing. I think they can come up with some sort of cool solutions that maybe aren't even covered here. But what was your follow on? So what was the follow up thing to the infantry point?
That was it. The max width size was the follow-up point, because I think that's a good conversation as well. Like, if you are giving step up, then there's still going to be, if you keep the rules in where you can still do supporting attacks, then you'll end up with a bunch of other stuff. So I think you'll end up, and also ultimately, yes, the lines of infantry look silly. Like they don't look, because you said this a long time ago, because like the rule of three, one of the things that you pointed out very early was your argument for the rule of three and why you didn't want to see there'd be 27 gyrocopters or whatever was not that it was broken or unbroken, was how it made people feel. And I feel right now the infantry rules make people feel like this is rubbish, and my infantry are rubbish. And most of there's loads of really iconic non-infantry units. There's loads of cool cav and monsters and wizards and loads of cool stuff. But, there's lots of iconic infantry units as well. And having them not be part of the game feels bad. So I think that's just something that should be addressed. That's it.
Yep. And I think, sorry, you just sparked another idea, which is a point I think that is somewhat intentional about infantry being a minor player in this game. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but it does feel like the way that they allocated character allowance and the relative strength of units does feel like this game is built to be lower model count to be able to get people on the table. That I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but it does feel like, and the way JTY went to bat for, like powerful dragons and things like that suggests to me that sort of that hero hammer vibe is intentionally being reached for. And that to me feels like an attempt to make it so that you can get an army built at 2,000 points more quickly. And I have been saying that for a while. I think that as this game evolves though, we're going to want more than that.
Yeah, and you can see that in some of the marketing as well. Some of the marketing was like, "Hey, this is how you do unit fillers." JTY was talking about, in articles they were talking about unit fillers. They're very conscious. I think it's a good point that they're very conscious about like people getting their armies ready. But now we're here. Now we are getting our armies ready. I think there's nothing wrong with. There's nothing wrong with having a conversation about like, look, let's make some of these infantry more playable. I think that's a fair thing to do, and I think we've done that really well.
Yeah.
So what's the next point for you?
For me, the next thing will be, this might be a sort of a broad bucket discussion, but it's charges and how charging works mechanically. I feel like the way it works right now with having to charge on a direct line, having to account for your wheel, winds up with feeling like you don't have as much control in how you complete your charges and how you line up your charges. And I think this actually particularly is bad for units that don't have a big budget in their movement. But again, going back to how like 8th edition charges worked, essentially it was, are you within range? So were you within, for a regular unit, I believe it was 2d6, so like within 12 inches, could you make the charge? If you could measure a point on your unit to that unit, you could make the charge. You would get a free wheel to line it up, and then those two units would actually sort of like maximize once they made contact. Once you close the door, they would then maximize their base-to-base contact. And that is it was basically an abstraction and gave a lot of free movement, especially to infantry. But it did make charging feel like you had a lot more control over it. And the randomness in it was basically based on that 2d6 roll. What wound up happening in that game, though, was that you had a pretty long charge distance for most infantry, and cavalry on the other side actually didn't charge much further than an infantry unit could. They could do a 3d6 charge. So like there really wasn't a big range advantage to cav. So again, that was another nerf to cav and a buff to infantry. I think in this game though, if we just abstracted a bit more the sort of order of operations on charges, and maybe this is a specific buff to infantry and not to other things, then you can. I just feel like you would you could make a lot more charges, and then also you would wind up in situations like right now you can wind up in situations where, especially on follow-ups and things like that, where a unit will like overrun into another unit, and they're like corner to corner, and they just stay there. They don't like maximize to each other. They just wind up on this weird edge to edge situation, and it just doesn't look great, and it doesn't feel great, and it feels like a lot of the time that you don't have control in how you make your charges and how you line them up. And so like I'd love to see a streamlining or an abstraction to charges, because we've seen like in how a lot of the FAQs have addressed, for example, a lot of the movement rules. They've given a ton of freedom. Random movers were reworded to be quite permissive. So it's a 3d6, and then that's your movement characteristics, and you can do what you want with it, right? You still you can't do like charges into flanks and stuff if you're in the front, but you still can just stand still. Previously, random movers had to move in a straight line, whatever you rolled the dice. Mm-hmm. So they gave you control there. They gave up on being aware of how far the rear ranks are moving on a wheel. There's like all these places where movement is abstracted. The one place where it's not, and it's the most punishing to me, it feels, is on the charge, and especially paying for that wheel, and also not being able to, aside from the need to maximize and get as many guys in base to base, like there's just does not feel to be like a lot of freedom in how you make your charges, and that includes like avoiding difficult terrain, all sorts of situations that just seem kind of punitive and also very nitty gritty as well. Like, yeah. I would bet that a lot of people play the game in a much more abstract way than the way it is written. They just don't play it as punishing as I think it actually is written.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say also when you're watching skirmishers do what seems to be like, 180 backflips.
Yes.
When you're just there trying your hardest to just move a little bit, you're like, no, I'm afraid that's too much of a wheel. I would agree with you massively on this point. I think that's a really solid point. And again, a little bit of a boon to infantry and those slower blocks, because the other units I feel like are moving orders of magnitude faster, and both in the movement phase, the charge phase, all those phases, they feel like they're just doing so much more than you as another unit is doing. So I agree with you. And those awkward situations you end up in are then also like, okay, at some point these two units would face each other. They wouldn't just stand next to each other with two guys having a battle. This is odd. Like you could absolutely see there being a rule. It's just like you need those two units to turn about their center and face, like find the center point between the two units and just make them lock. That's what you need to do, and you need to have a battle, because that makes a lot of sense. I super agree with that. A lot of sense.
And you're going to get, and that creates a lot more situations on the tabletop where you have an epic battle, like where you have guys in base-to-base contact, they're squared up, and like they're going at it. And again, from there, the mechanics of like fallback in good order and pushback make battles, I think, dynamic, assuming we can maybe juice the effects of infantry. Like getting there a lot of the time, again, you're just sort of you're not lined up properly, and it just seems kind of silly. I think just as a quick follow on to this would be the when you're resolving combat. This is a very specific scenario, but it's perhaps maybe of all of the things, my least favorite, because it's just so maddening to me, which is like in a situation where you have like a unit that's charged the front and a unit that's charged the flank, and then you win because you just did a great thing, right? Like you did what Warhammer wants you to do. You flank your opponent, you charge them, you broke them. They have now either Fabigoed or they've actually, in the scenario, Fabigoed. When you're then doing your pursuit roll, you're very likely to block your own units, because again, it's not abstracted. And you don't get to choose. Like, for example, in the charge phase, if you declare a multi-charge and two units charge, they move in simultaneously. And at least in that situation, you can pick where they wind up going. But because on the pursuit roll, it's one at a time. Generally speaking, on that follow-up, you are winding up now in a disadvantaged, because you're blocking yourself from being able to actually get both units back into combat. And that's such a feel bad, because you've done everything right, and now you will often wind up where those units are now set up on the board in a situation where they can be piecemealed, attacked by the very unit they just beat up. And then they're following up into you. It's brutal, and I think it does come up, and it's almost a situation where when you're playing the game, you have to like learn that actually doing what you think is the right thing, flanking an opponent and charging them in the front. You have to realize that in a lot of cases, especially with things like chariots, that actually is a bad thing. That is actually not a good thing to do. It will wind up with you in a worse situation than doing something else. So that's a feel bad that I think could easily be cleaned up.
That's a good point. I think I super agree with that. It's not something that I'd thought of, but yeah, I think that's a really solid point. Definitely.
Ironically, you kind of need to have a brick of infantry fighting a brick of infantry, which is kind of rare, but like kind of rare right now. But like I experienced that, going into a Beastman army, my man Moose Green in the Discord. And then also, at the various times with my Black Orcs, I've run into that a bunch of times where I feel like I've done the right things and I just get punished, and I've lost games because of it. And that's maybe of all the things that have stuck in my craw, that one actually does. All this other stuff kind of just affects aesthetically what the armies look like because the game plays. But that one particularly was just mechanically one that really bothered me. What do you got next?
Okay. I've got some real spicy ones, but I'll go for a less spicy one. In again how the game plays and the feel of the units. We're really talking about the feel of the units and the feel of the game and how it looks. So my next one is that I think certain heavy cavalry units should have 2 wounds. So my argument for this, and I know some units do have it. We do have the monstrous cav section. I know that. But my argument for this is that I think that after a certain amount of, I think a certain point, you say this unit is a lot of points for a single wound.
Yep.
Right? That's what it is. So I don't know what I want to add on or not or take away so that it makes sense for the points cost that it is for a wound. But I think that you could just make them a little bit more survivable with an extra wound apiece. And then, don't need to give them stomps. You just need to recognize that, like, you're adding, and it's kind of exactly what we're talking about with the survivability of infantry. I'm really talking about their survivability while not making it so it's an eternal grind fest. I'm just saying at the points cost that some of the units are now, either the points costs need to come down drastically, or you need to make it so they have 2 wounds, and having 2 wounds feels like a better option because then you get some
sense too.
Because then you get some stratification. Like Grail Knights having 2 wounds is a great thing in my opinion because you really understand that they're like really elite. You've added that extra layer of defensiveness onto them as a unit. Multi-wound weapons will work against them, which is kind of like a fun side note that's actually kind of like, okay, like I have more use for those things as well. But I feel like certain units like Grail Knights, Chosen Knights, need an extra wound and need that stratification off from other units because, like, they don't feel elite. They cost elite. They don't feel elite. And I think that is a massive problem, in my opinion. Like, the lethality of the units that are actually lethal just piss all over their survivability. So I think that's a problem.
I think I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, Chatter keyed on what I was just about to say as well, which is that if you look at the sort of evolution of the game, at some point they added monstrous infantry, monstrous cavalry, multi-wound cavalry and infantry, and they never went back to adjust cavalry in a world where you had multi-wound. And also those wounds started for whatever reason at 3. You basically go from one model, 1 wound to 1 model, 3 wounds, which is really fascinating to me. And that sort of that middle gap of and it seems like a no-brainer. There's a horse and a dude. Like that seems that if you just visually, it looks like 2 wounds. I think they've done a really good job too of making it so that, especially in a world where they were 2 wounds, but like heavy cavalry, especially right now, a lot of the times is not on a 2-up save. A lot of times it is on a 3-up save. So they're a little bit less survivable as is. And I think you would with the 2 wound thing, you would just need to account for the stuff that is on a 2-up, just because that would make them a little more tricky, but maybe not even. especially if we're looking at situations, especially if we look at buffing other things, specifically infantry, to be able to absorb and deal with cavalry. If you just gave most elite pointed heavy cavalry an extra wound, I think you may not even need to adjust points.
I don't think so. I think that's I think in the case of some, you're looking at, in case of some of them, I think Grail Knights are around 50, but you're looking at like 25 points a wound, which is like very, very high. Like I don't know if there is an infantry block that you could build that's 25 points a wound, but either way, like it's very, very expensive. And then also on the other, kind of on the tail end of that, in a really odd way, is when you go down to more of your, like, you know, your goblins, your night goblins, and your horde units, they've just got wounds for days. They've got absolutely just tons and tons and tons of wounds. Yeah. And when those units go in, they do a lot of damage, but like not that much really. Like not that much for, like, I'm not arguing for that output right now. Like, I maybe even would come back for an argument about their output. But right now, I feel there's a real distinction for the heavy cav. I'm not arguing for light cav. We know what their job is.
Yeah, I think light cav staying at 1 wound would be thematic and perfect. Yeah. They're not supposed to be stuck in. They're not supposed to be toe to toe.
No.
You know what I mean? They're supposed to be out there doing weird bullshit. Like, I think again, like, it just seems to me, it seems like a no-brainer. Maybe it was one of those taboo things like that they didn't want to cross.
Yeah.
But they're pointed like the most powerful things in the game, at the same time as coexisting with, on a per point basis, monstrous infantry, monstrous cavalry especially.
Monstrous cavalry especially, yeah.
You know, and those guys have 3 wounds at least. It seems like such a no-brainer to give heavy cavalry almost across the board. Just give them an extra wound. And don't change another thing. See what happens. I mean, immediately I'm thinking about Bretonnia, and like that's a bit of a sticky issue. But if you're juicing the output of other things, such as, you know, of infantry, maybe Bretonnia would need to be adjusted on a points basis. But like, yeah, I think that would be good. And another thing, if I could follow on this, is. Because anything else you want to say there? Because I think that's a brilliant point.
No, that's it. I like when I'm seeing units that are like the elite of the best thing in the world. It's not that I want them to be any cheaper, because that's the other thing you can do. But then I'm like, why is a Ground Knight? Why is a Ground Knight 25 points?
Yeah, because then you're gonna get units of 20 of the most elite rare warriors. Because they're cheap, and like
that's weird.
You know, like
that's what
happens in 40K.
I have this argument all the time in 40K and Age of Sigmar. And I call it the race to the bottom, because you're like you are just being like, oh, just make it cheaper. It's like there's a certain point where like cheapness is its own quality at a certain point as well, when you can just have too much of something just because it's cheap. And that's a really bad way to do game stuff. And it should just be like, and I can see why they didn't. I see that they were like, we'll basically copy and paste most of the rules and most of the stat profiles from the last edition. We'll bring it in. And I'm like, you've done great. The game works really well. I'm loving the game. The game's great. I just don't think I give, 4 dice to my Grail Knight guy to save. He rolls 3 ones and he's lost 150 points. It feels stupid, right?
Yes.
Like that's what it feels like. So I feel like we should have a conversation about that, and it should be changed. That's it.
Yeah, and also, like, we can see just in the way, like, every single arcane journal that has access to cavalry. Like, if it's from a grand army that has access to cavalry, has a cavalry-focused army in it.
Yeah.
So like, it's clear JTY loves horses. Yeah. And I do too. And I think, this is actually something that, even going back to, again, 8th edition, seemed obvious and was confusing as to why it wasn't adjusted. And I think a lot of the internal balance of fantasy, and this has a lot to do with the fact that they haven't inflated a lot of the stats, like especially on damage output and on defense in this game, with the exception of some outliers, just makes it so that, I don't know, it feels like there's always a fight, right? Yeah. And heavy cavalry right now, the reason why that they're in the fight is because they can charge super far, which comes to my next point, which is Swiftstride, as it relates to the game and how powerful a mechanic Swiftstride is. I think when you see heavy chariots, Heavy chariots often do not have Swiftstride. In fact, I think rarely, if ever. And I feel like Swiftstride should be a rule specific to fast and nimble things, not fast, heavy things. So I think you could give Cavalry the extra wound and just say no more Swiftstride for you guys. And I might be speaking out of church. I think for the most part, most heavy cavalry does have Swiftstride. But I feel like things that are big and heavy and fly should not have Swiftstride. And I think, especially flyers, I think just should not have Swiftstride. They already have a massive advantage in movement. And I think even stuff that is on like heavy things, monstrous cav, heavy cav, in the examples that do have Swiftstride, I think they shouldn't have them. I think Swiftstride should be a unique thing to, skirmishers, light units, open order units, things that are actually quick and stride quickly. I think that's the advantage that they should have, the ability to get in there and punch first. Whereas stuff that is heavier should just not have that rule. They already, generally speaking, have bigger ranges and movements. And again, if you reduce that maximum charge range for stuff like dragons, for stuff like some of the big smashy cavalry units out there, you're just going to make it again you're going to make the board bigger because the threat ranges are smaller, and you're just not going to feel like you're always just way outranged basically in your damage and threat output. So that would be one way I would tweak Swiftstride, is just because they've done so well, I think, in general, theming their rules and giving keywords and special rules to the right units. Swiftstride just feels like it's a unit it's an ability that's a little bit overkill, and especially when combined with fly. I just think anything that flies should not have Swiftstride. I think flying is its own Swiftstride rule. Where basically it's guaranteeing that extra distance because you fly. You don't need to also have that additional buff to your movement. I think that would do a lot to help things.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And also, again, a great way of delineating between like heavy cavalry, light cavalry. Light cavalry could have Swiftstride. Heavy cavalry cannot. Heavy cavalry can have first charge, which obviously is really brilliant. And, you don't give that to light cav as an example, unless, there's a certain reason or thematic reason that you're given to it, which is what the universal special rules are used for. But I agree with you. Threat ranges need to be rethought a tad, and Swiftstride is probably the easiest solution to doing that, especially for the big bads. That makes a lot of sense, and it does make sense. Like light cavalry faster, heavy cavalry are more smashing, more survivable, and then a big dragon is also pretty fast, just not lumbering. And why it's so fast, I don't understand. Why? I know why. They're the fastest they could be. It's a phoenix. It's as fast as it could be. Yeah, it's a dragon. It's as fast as it could be. You're like, okay, fair enough, but no. Let's just let's pull it down a bit. That's a great point.
It's fast because it flies. That's why. So like that's enough. That really is enough. Especially since
have you seen a turkey fly? It's slow.
Well, but that's the cool thing. They gave fly a movement characteristic, right? So like fly is a characteristic. So if there are units in the game that are essentially turkeys, that don't have the fly 10, and so like there's no reason why they can't delinate. If they want a flyer to be quick, they can make it quick, and they can go above 10 if they really want it to be super, super fast. So I think, finding those places where you can just add a little bit more nuance and like look at it's funny, like in all of these Games Workshop games, what always gets keyed on? Speed. Like speed is always a big deal, and resilience is always a big deal. And right now, I think a lot of the units that are the most resilient also happen to be the fastest. Yeah. And I think that's a matter of internal balance that I think you could tweak. You don't have to make them slow. Like they can still be very quick, but there should be stuff that's, I think, faster.
Yeah, I agree. Was that my point? Oh no, that was your point.
Yeah,
it's your point. Okay. All right. Crack. There's what would you like? Would you like real spicy, or would you like more like everyone like that? Which one would you like first?
I think we've had some very agreeable points up until now, so let's go spice. Let's get
ban
people
the Green Knight. Ban it. Just ban it. right?
Yeah, the Green Knight.
All right. So do you know what's really fun is bringing this up at the point where, and all my Bretonian fans right now, I apologize, bringing that point where we've just talked about movement, you've talked about charge ranges, you've talked about charge interactions, we've talked about threat ranges, we've talked about the instability of like smaller slowing units and how they're incredibly punished, and then for just absolutely no fucking reason on earth, a single base can just emerge from the wilderness, like an inch away, right, and then just be like, by the way, I'm also immortal unless you have magic weapons, and you're like, what? All right. Like, so I don't necessarily think ban the Green Knight, but I would say that there needs to be a distinctive range that's not an inch that he can emerge from, because I think it's the king of bullshit mountain, and Bretonian players obviously stoked on the Green Knight, and I get it, I really do. But I think the way that it interacts with, we've just talked about all of the problems with movement, all of the things, all the micro small changes, and this guy just does what.
He's also ethereal. He's also ethereal.
Yeah, so only magical weapons. So I should be really clear. What happens is, if you're the Bretonian player, you're playing against Bretonian. If you haven't played against them, they'll roll a dice. And then the Green Knight will emerge from a piece of natural terrain. Obviously,
on a 3-up.
Yeah, on a 3-up. The answer to this is to make no terrain natural. At which point, my friend Connor was like, I'm just going to bring some bark with me and throw it on the board. What are you going to do then, bitch? I was like, that's a good point.
Natural terrain also, as was pointed out to me by Os as being pretty open-ended in its definition. It's basically difficult terrain is how they define natural terrain. So yeah, although it is called natural terrain, it actually is very broadly defined.
Yeah.
So you couldn't even really do that. Like, aha, everything is just made of cobblestones. No, if it's difficult, he can pop up in it. And
also he can pop up like right in the flank of a unit. And importantly, like Val has just pointed out, if you don't have magical weapons, you literally can't do any damage to him. Therefore, and he's not, like, his output is also incredibly good for a hero. Like Chaos Lords on a horse crying right now, like for what he does. And it's not a points adjustment, because I actually do like what he brings to the Bretonian force. What he really brings is that mobility to be like, hey, as I'm moving all my lances forward, right, ignoring Peg Knights, while I'm moving everything forward, there's this thing that's going to be, worrying your archers or causing you a dilemma. I'd much prefer to see it be like a board edge situation. I'd much prefer to see it have some sort of distance and range that isn't an inch, just something like that. So ban is obviously my hyperbolic take, but I think it needs addressing. I think that's a fair point about a unit that is the king of bullshit mountain, and I'm going to just say it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways you could approach the Green Knight. First of all, he's got an amazing weapon, so he can do just a bucket of attacks. He is a lot of points, but I think there's I think essentially the biggest feel bad about the Green Knight is that he comes back. Honestly, if the Green Knight just didn't come back, it seems gratuitous, that rule, or make it a 6. Like, if you really want that Green Knight to come back sometimes, make it a 6, because I do think he is. Yeah, I think he's cool. I love powerful shit, and I just think that this one's a bit cooked. So if you kill the Green Knight, so he originally will come on a 3-up. Again, I think that's a reasonable roll. You can fluff a 3-up for a while. That's fine. But if you kill him, so if you manage to get your magical attacks in, or do as I did, I managed to charge him with a with a lot of combat res, and I chased him off the table, and he died. So like that's how I killed the Green Knight. It had no magical attacks. So you can even deal with the fact that you don't have magical attacks. The fact of the matter is, though, immediately the next turn, now he comes back on a 4-up the next time when he dies, and he's just stuck with 4-up
with one less wound.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course, with one less wound. But he comes back on the 4-up, and he's just back, and he's probably in a place where you have. You've moved your things to deal with him where he was, and now he's somewhere else. That feels bad. And I think the things that do sort of come back to life, I mean, the only thing that I can think of is the Abomination from Skaven off the top of my head, where, it pops back up with, D3 plus whatever wounds. But that happens on a 6. So 20% of the time as a Skaven player, you're like, yeah! But In this case, it's just probably and you get to keep rolling. It's not even a one time.
No.
It's that he's just basically back in reserves and he comes back out on the 4-up. So
I also like the idea. I like the idea. I saw someone say once that like after a round in which he's fought. So, you know, like if he gets charged or he charges, which is probably more likely with the current rules, then he just goes off the board again. And then on a 3-up, you can bring him back at the next step where you're normally allowed to bring them back. So the idea is he's gone, he's done his duty, and then he's not in some ongoing combat being a persistent annoyance. He goes away, and then he might come back again. Like he's turned up, he's done some stuff, he goes away, he comes back and he does some more. That's kind of interesting. Then you could even maybe lower the points. Right, you could even make like that
if he was kind of shifting in and out of time and space.
Yeah, exactly. Right, but I think right now, I think that's the thing. And you know, do Bretonnians need the help? That's a different conversation. Does it feel bad? Everything feels bad. Being shot by a cannon feels bad. I'm not talking about those sorts of feel bads. When you're just like, oh, an inch away anywhere, you're like, okay, I have one magic weapon in mind. I'm going to put that right there. And he's like, well, guess what, bitch? I'm going to go on the other side. You're like, oh. Because you also skip one of the most important stages of the game, which is deployment. Because deployment is pretty much like, you know, the death knell of a badly played game. You've got to make sure you line up your things that can deal with the other guy's stuff against the other guy's stuff, like in a line. So what you got to do. That's how it works, especially for slower stuff. So if you've deployed everything out and then you're like, right, that's my one guy, my only unit that can deal with that. You're like, okay, well, there's over there. You're like, oh, well, I won't be dealing with that today then. But, you know, I'm not saying to ban it. I'm just saying think about it, and maybe have a little rethink.
Yeah, I think he probably needs a tasteful nerf. And there's a number of ways you could take the feel bads away from him. Honestly, I think, and this might dovetail into one of my next points, but I have two things I want to say. Because one is banning the Green Knight, believe it or not, is not as spicy as you think. Because I think
really?
Culturally, there would be a lot of players who come from a 6th edition mentality. 6th edition came out, was a lot more vanilla. They had a lot less. So you come out of 5th edition, Hero Hammer, lots of really powerful characters, lots of special characters. And this, to me, I saw this in 40K too, when I first started playing. Special characters themselves were a bit taboo. The idea being that why is every single battle that is taking place in this world featuring the most elite, important people of that world? And so special characters, thematically, for a lot of people, are a turnoff. And so I think that a lot of people would embrace the idea of banning special characters for match play. I do not think that's the right way to go. And I think they've also really nailed the balance and the flavor of the special characters we've seen so far. Probably even to the point where you don't see them very often because they're so specific. You know what I mean? Like they give you benefits that are very, very specific. And you know, you might do better building them as generic characters anyway. So yeah, the Green Knight, however, is a big glaring exception. I would even say Elise Duchard. I think on paper she's ridiculous. Just Bretonnians are so good they don't even need her help most of the time. So yeah, I think the Green Knight. I think honestly you can fix him just by making him not come back. And the thing I was going to lead into as a sort of addendum to that of the frustration of the Green Knight is if you kill him and he goes off the board, you get those points. If he comes back on the board, you do not get those points. So he could stick that 4-up in the 6th turn, and you know you killed him in turn 2, and suddenly he's back, and that's like a 300 and something point swing.
Pretty rough.
So I think the way victory points are done, and this is actually a question I think for me as a TO as I'm putting the finishing touches on the SBO pack, is one area that I've seen some places starting to make modification of this, but when do things actually count for kill points?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a bit of an arbitrary thing right now where, you know, like I'm just reading this so I don't miss it. You get 100% of the points for anything you kill. Each enemy unit that is fleeing at the end of the battle is worth a number of victory points equal to 50% of its points cost. And then, so that's basically dead or fled. That's the fled. And then each enemy unit that's been reduced to less than 25% of its starting unit strength at the end of the battle is worth a number of victory points equal to 25% of its points, rounding up. So I guess my question is, why? Why not just get the points?
What for
what you kill?
For what you like? Oh, you mean all of the points? Like if you kill,
we'll start there.
If it's 10 points a model, and there's 20 models, and you've killed 18 models, you get 180 points. Like
this is a thought experiment. I'm just curious to know what is the benefit of doing it like this versus some other gradient, or just saying if you kill something, you get the points for it, and that includes things that are rezzed. I think that's a great way to nerf things like Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts, is just saying that, like, if you kill a dragon down to like no wounds, you should still get points for those wounds. And even if they're being res back. I don't know. I think you should be rewarded for the damage you're doing in a kill points game. But maybe I'm over. That's probably that's a spicy tank. Get points for everything you kill. I don't think that's right. But I'm going to throw it out to you. What do you think that the way kill points work right now capture, the effort of both players as far as like the damage that they're doing?
I think they do. I think those last two horses not quite running off the board and keeping some points is great. I think, you get to the end of the battle and there's three guys. I think doing the damage is always really fun, but I think getting towards the end of the battle and looking at your dregs, the lads that are left, is really, really cinematic and really engaging and is a really fun element of how the game works. I think Green Knight conversation is you just get the points for that. That's fine. And I think actually I wouldn't want to mess around too much with the kill points, because I think actually the game designers, we saw that with the Dwarf Arcane Journal, actually really understand giving kill points, not giving kill points up is a really fun mechanic and quite engaging as well. So I think that's fun. And like building,
I don't know if we've seen anyone push that one as far as it can be pushed yet, though. But in that particular example,
I'm going to go for it, I reckon, because I think that sounds really fun. But I think that there is definitely scope in the game to just look at a couple of units or a couple of things and say they should give kill points. Like, personally, I don't think a Hell Cannon should give a single kill point, because it's
yeah, you can only give up kill points if you actually can kill something. That's not a bad. That's not a bad.
Like he's the 215 points I give to my opponent 60% of the time.
Right.
But yeah, I would say I don't mind there being bonuses as well. Like, I know you already get that for heroes, you already get that for your general, but like a wizard, if you can get a wizard, I feel like that should be some bonus points. Like if you can get your hand on a grubby little spellcaster in a loincloth, you can stab that fucker. You should be able to get like 25 points at least 100 points in my opinion. 25 points for each magic level.
Yeah. That's interesting, because you get a bonus for killing the general or getting the battle standard. Yeah, having like a bounty on wizards or toughness 6 creatures. I think that's an idea we batted around a little bit. I'm also thinking like and I think this is something I think that has been done in some places, but doing the like for to stratify the victory points thing a little bit. Perhaps do something like, especially on behemoths, monstrous creatures, multi-wound models. If you've killed half of it, I think you should get some points for it. Or at the very least, if you've achieved the reduced to less than 25% of its of starting unit strength. And I wonder if maybe we're doing that wrong, because I believe a behemoth's unit strength is. Isn't a behemoth unit strength the amount of wounds it has?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. If you get below 25% of its wounds, you get 25% of its points.
Does everyone do that?
I do that. And the people at my events do that.
That might just be something I've missed. So yeah, anyway, so maybe my whole point is a little bit moot. But I do think maybe something like 50% gets you 25, 25% gets you 50, something like that. Or maybe not. Maybe we just keep it as it is. But I thought it was a good food for thought, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. Or maybe just a bonus, like maybe there's a Dragon Slayer bonus. If you kill something that's a toughness 6 creature, you get 100 extra points or something like that. I think is worth exploring.
Yeah, I agree with you. Apparently, they weren't doing that at Warhammer World as an FYI. So you're playing the same way Warhammer World does. Don't worry. Okay, so I'm going to do my next point because I'd like to label that, if that's cool. It's a really easy one, and I'm going to right now. I'm just waiting for my victory top bus tour around Europe and North America, where people just celebrate me. The Pillar of Fire moves a random direction, and you don't get to choose the direction it goes. So there you go. That's it. I'm doing it. Random direction.
I think that basically kills Pillar of Fire.
Good.
I think it's better to move it to strength 2 than to kill its direction.
To just make it scatter. Like, and also, for everyone who doesn't know what the problem is, Pillar of Fire is a vortex that you can cast, obviously from Wizard in the shooting phase, and then at the beginning of each turn, it moves. It moves up to D6 inches, and when it moves over a unit, it does D3 plus 3, strength 3, strength 4, strength 3, strength 3 hits, strength 4 hits, whatever they are. But AP2. AP2 is the important part, and then flaming and magical attacks. But the important part is you get to direct you get to pick the direction of the Pillar of Fire. And that is the bit that's really disastrous. Really, really disastrous. And it also moves at the beginning of each turn. And there aren't other vortexes that are as strong. Like, there are other vortexes that do different stuff, and I don't really know if it's necessary in game for it to exist. I don't really personally see it being necessary to exist. Like, again, it really ties in with like the point. My point is this: a circle, which I've not painted and I've done nothing with, and is just some fucking plastic I found in an old box. Is more powerful than several of my like dedicated like soldiers who I've painted, with histories and backstories and children and families. Sure. And so I don't personally see it being and I've had this same argument right now in Age of Sigmar, where the spells are too strong. And I'm like, this is a game where, yes, there are spells in the game, but I don't think the vortex, a little plastic circle, needs to be as strong or as effective. More effective than war machines, more effective than many missile units. That seems silly. So just have it move randomly. There we go.
I think the fact that it doesn't move randomly is what makes it fun and unique. I think the fact that it's strength 3 and -3.
AP2.
AP2, sorry. I was thinking of Fanatics. I think its strength is probably the biggest, and also its spammability, especially when you look at stuff like Wood Elves, who are able to just bring as much of it as they want, specifically when they're using Sisters of the Thorn. That's where I think it gets really out of control. Because I mean, even in your case, you had a list that potentially could have 4 or 5 instances of it, 4 instances of it. So I think probably.
But that wasn't. Its affecting game by having many of them wasn't the thing that bothered me. The thing that bothered me is that a crap Perspex piece of plastic, right, was killing my soldiers, or the opponent's soldiers, more importantly. It was that, like, it didn't feel like I was really battling. It did feel like a Pillar of Fire was going through stuff, but, I haven't modeled a Pillar of Fire. I have done a couple, but they're not painted yet.
That's such a great opportunity. By the way, get Tomo on that. We need for all of the remains in play vortices, we should start having those, because, like, that's I think such a great opportunity for everyone in this game is to actually model that. But I think, me personally, I think that's actually your spiciest take. And I like Pillar of Fire. And just like I like the Green Knight, I think it's just a little cooked. And I think actually you could probably, if we were to talk about Magic, something that used to be very common in Magic is you couldn't have duplicates of the same spell in the same army. So I think that might just be one way you could go. That would also reduce, I think, the, like, again, that overlap or that spammability thing. Anytime where you can just press Control Copy on something isn't always bad. But if something is particularly good, in this case, Pillar of Fire, if it is possible to get lots of them, that's where it gets bad. Like Pillar of Fire, if there's just one, honestly, man, like there are so many things that in this game are good, and it's just good. It's when there's like a billion other friggin' things, and you're hemmed in, and it's difficult terrain, and all that kind of stuff. Like that's where I think, in my opinion, I think that's where it gets. So that may be the only time, one of our only real disagreements there.
Okay.
I think it could take a nerf, and I think systematically you could look at adjusting magic so that like it has a little bit more restriction on being able to take multiple of this, the same lore or multiple of the same spell. Because it used to be if you randomly rolled up on your level whatever, 4 spells, the next guy who rolled up wouldn't be able to get those spells. So there was also a little mini game, a little strategy about like trying to make sure you got the right spells on the right guys. So I think that could be something as well that could help. I think on the point of spicy templates.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Get rid of chance to be hit. Just delete that sentence. No chance to be hit. If you're touched by a template, you get hit. All vortexes work that way. So like your stone throwers, your breath weapons. They did the double nerf. They made them harder to target where you're going. You got to put them in very specific ways. They made base sizes larger so they don't cover as much. It's the same 3-inch template it's always been. And then they said if you're not fully covered, you're only hit on a 4-up. I think screw that. Get rid of chance to be hit. I think it's also a pain. It's annoying. So I've gone through the process of actually like rolling my scatter, measuring that all out. And now I have to like haggle with my opponent, even if it's a friendly thing. It's like, okay, tell me how many I might have hit, and then you have to roll your 4-ups from there. It's just superfluous double nerf. I don't think it's even accounted for in points. I think you could literally remove it and leave War Machines exactly where they are. Get rid of chance to be hit. I think it's done.
Yeah, I don't hate that idea either. I'm trying to think. Do I care? Not really. Like, it feels like the impact of the War Machines is so minimal. Like, it really is. Like, it makes me laugh. The which one is it in the miscast table where you miscast, but then also you've got a chance to be hit, and I'm like, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I did the spell. I should be hit. Like, hit me.
But I think that's a punishment for that didn't factor in the fact that bases were bigger and like so like just by virtue of the fact that the 20 millimeter base became a 25 millimeter base, reduce the effectiveness of template weapons by whatever percentage change that is, 20%. I did that math. I didn't even do that math, but anyway, whatever it might be, right? So like, just get rid of chance to be hit. It's superfluous and an over the top nerf. I have one last biggie.
Okay.
So do you have any more?
I've only got one more, but you did hit me with your last biggie. It sounds exciting.
No, you go. I just did chance to be hit. What you got?
You cannot do screams from vampire counts into combat.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We all agree. Everyone's happy. Yes. Moving on.
Treat it as a shooting attack. Treat it just like a breath weapon.
A shooting attack. Yeah. Easy peasy.
Yeah. No problem.
I don't know why we even need to talk about it. Like
slam dunk.
Slam dunk. Let's go. Move on.
Treat it like, or as they worded in the most confusing way possible, like breath weapons. It's a type of shooting attack. Okay. What is? All right. Mm-hmm. My last one. I can't believe we haven't talked about this at all.
I'm ready.
Because it's maybe the most broken, and by that I mean just like literally not fully baked part of the rules with the least amount of explained interactions. And an incredibly common unit, and that's skirmishers.
Skirmishers, yeah. Okay, I was like, I mean, do you know why I didn't bring it up? Because I was going to write it down, and then I wrote it down at one point. I was like, just delete that keyword, like just get rid of it. Yeah, they'd be like, but how do my skirmish units work? I'm like, fuck off. That's what I would have said back to them. Fuck off. I don't want to know how it works. Skirmish fans out there in tatters right now, I apologize. Could you explain skirmishers? Hold on, we've only got an hour. Could you try to TLDR skirmishers for people before we go into it?
They seem like they should be pretty straightforward. They, unlike most units in the game, they are not ranked up. They have unit coherency, like you'd be very comfortable understanding in Age of Sigmar or 40K. But that very simple distinction for skirmishers makes them interact with everything else in the game in the most awkward way possible, and often in ways that just don't make sense from the rules themselves. It feels to me like skirmishers were something for a long time in the rule set, and very late in the game changed to what they came up with in the end. because of the way their rules interact with the rest of the game. It feels like a bolt-on. And again, I love everywhere in this game where they abstracted for where they've abstracted things to make it not necessarily simple, but easier to deal with. And for skirmishers, I think the biggest problem is right now it's ill-defined what they actually are when they are in combat, as it is the case with like open order and close order and lance formations and stuff like that. A formation is both a formation and it's also an ability. So like it gives you stuff. And it's also how you're arranged on the table. So for skirmishers right now, there's a lot of ambiguity in the rules as to what they are when they're in combat. Do they have flanks? How do they pursue or flee out of combat? In what direction? Because they in theory don't have ranks. They have 360-degree shooting arcs, which makes it kind of hard to manage their line of sight because you have to do it on a model by model basis. There's just a lot about them that's not abstracted and not clearly defined in the rules, and it needs quite simply a comprehensive rewrite.
Also, sorry, I just wanted to point out, also they're fugly bitches.
How so?
I just wanted to say that. They look gross on the table.
Oh, okay. I see. The most recent FAQ did a little bit to help with the stringing out of them, like the extreme stringing out, by making it so that, guys who can't get into combat just die if you charge them. So that's something. So like they did something in the rules that encourages them to be a tighter formation. But in general, from almost top to bottom, in every place where they interact with the game, it's either ambiguous or convoluted, and also gives a lot of benefits that make them feel not very Warhammery. Again, I hate to be a broken record, but I think that skirmishers probably work this way. And I'm speaking out of church here, so roast me in the comments for this. But I assume in things like Warhammer Ancient Battles and 6th and 7th edition, I assume skirmishers worked closer to how they work in Old World. When you look at 8th edition, again, for quality of life improvement, skirmishers simply arranged, they arranged in sort of what I assumed open order would be. They were in ranks, but they were arranged so that they were spaced, I think, 1 inch apart, but in ranks on trays. So they visually looked different. They had much more permissive movement rules. I believe they didn't have to wheel. I think they just sort of moved freely and pivoted and stuff. But they just were just way easier to conceptualize and interact with everything else on the table. And so I'm not saying you have to go back to that, but I think they really do need to go through and errata and fix skirmishers, because it is maybe the most genuinely broken component of the rules, in the sense that they just don't interact the way I think they do. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think if you want to see how we fix skirmishers, check out our FAQ. That will be updated as well very shortly. And you'll see that there's just a number of situations that literally are not resolvable if you are just going by the rules of the game as they are written. And so that's maybe the biggest letdown as far as a quality control is. Most of what we're talking about so far are like tweaks, game balance things, aesthetic choices, whatever. Skirmishers fundamentally just are very problematic right now, and I think they need to tidy them up.
I think that's very fair. The point we should probably end on, though, is that the game still works really great. Yeah, all of these things we're getting down. If you've only played like 2 or 3 games, this is, I mean, Val's point about earlier, like, some of the units will be like, oh, why do I just keep not ever attacking with infantry? Eventually you'll get there. But the game works great. Everything kind of works. Like everything, like, and that's like the best thing. Like everything definitely works if you turn up like, I'm gonna charge in. Like, how's that connect? And you just go, just put it in the middle, bro. Like that will work. It's an amazing game when you do that, because you like no one's looking at anything and you're fine. Okay.
And again, I would bet that's how it, like, outside of the places where, like, really the crucible of these games is where we play them at events, tournaments and stuff. Not just because people are trying to get an advantage. I want to be really clear on this. It's because you want the game to be fair, and like you want to play the game within the bounds of the rules, so that way it's not played entirely by vibes. And so that's why people who play in events, I think, tend to have a real mastery of the rules. If you're playing at your house, you probably are just moving your units in. You know, you probably are adjusting things. You probably are like being a little more loose, and it works even better than I've seen at tournaments and stuff. And you probably have a lot more freedom because you're just not being such a stickler. And so, but when, you know, like, I think though, you can get the vibe that these guys are going for, that JTY and the writing staff are going for, by just adjusting some of these rules, making erratas, and yeah, going through their FAQ and deciding where, because there's so many FAQs that are actually erratas. Just go through the FAQ and fix the rules rather than having some weird ruling that doesn't reflect the rule. I think that's important. But yeah, other than that, I think that's a pretty good start to what we think they should do to tidy up the game.
Because the game plays great. Like, I think the ultimate conversation that we're having is like, make the game play even more like the game that we feel like it's going to play. And I mean, I bullied some very specific units, but you know, those are things that are commonplace in events that I see. Obviously, I've run, I think, 10 events now, and it's become like an entire hotbed, a training ground for YouTubers the world over.
Yes.
It has to be the most evolved meta in the old world ever, with the exception of obviously TTS and Warhol. But, you know, people are playing loads, and, you know, the common thread is, I would like my army to look more like how armies look. I would like my units to play more like how units play. And that's a really fair point, because this game system over all of the other game systems is trying, in my opinion, with its intense amount of USRs, is trying to really thematically do the thing which I've always thought war games should do, and it's my criticism of, you know, the main studio games. I should look at a unit, and I should be able to understand what it does by looking at the unit, and then the rules should try to make me feel that way too. You know, and that's true. Like, you know, I totally understand Impetuous on Dragon Princes. I also am furious at its like decision to be put on Dragon Prince. I'm like, come on, like that's silly. But they're like, you know, they're like, bro, they're like so up themselves, they're just gonna run off. You're like,
give them a second wound and who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Like, so there's like, and I really believe in that, right? I really believe in that. And I think Old World does it really, really well, but it could just do it a little bit better. That's what we want. Yeah. And also, this game will be iterative. They probably will do some of these things in the future, not all of these things.
I would bet it really depends, like how you conceptualize this game, because there's probably people watching being like, I don't think those are problems. Like, we don't play like that. How you conceptualize this game really depends on how you play it and the types of people you're playing it with. And so I think one of the things that did make a big difference for both AOS and 40K was when designers started actually going out in the world to events and seeing how their games were being played in the real world. And I think it blew their minds. And I think one of the things that gives me hope is that I know for a fact that at Warhammer World, they're running some of the, I think definitely the biggest events of Old World have all happened at Warhammer World, even after the SBO T.O. And, you know, they're seeing how people are playing this game as they've written it, and I think that bodes really well. So I'm hoping, because I know when they launched, they said we're going to do a rebalance. We're going to review rules. We're just not going to do it all the time. So far, they've answered questions, but I would, you know, I'm not going to put it past them to do a real sort of Old World 1.5 type of a release. Maybe I'm hoping for too much, but certainly something that maybe looks at points values, looks at tweaking things. I doubt you'll see a second one for heavy cavalry, but maybe you'll see points adjustments, stuff like that. Maybe we'll see some quality improvements, because the game is great, and I'm happy to see people playing it.
Me too. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed what we do, then you could join our very active, arguably too active, Discord community on our Patreon. arguably too active. And then come and hang out with us and talk about Old World, which is super fun. And then let us know what you want to see in the future. Like ultimately, like there's loads of other things that we could see. Like, you know, we could look for more expansive arcane journals, stuff like that. More and more ways to play. But I think they're coming. Like we're still very early in. We're four arcane journals. Five
more
arcane
than halfway through the core factions.
Like in under a year. Like with the entire roster of factions getting rules as well. So there's still so much playing this game, which is super fun. So let's keep going.
Yeah. And in the comments, what are some obvious things we didn't talk about? Because I can already think of one that is monstrous.
Well, let us know. All right. In the comments below. Thanks for listening. Stay square blessed. Stay square based.